Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's a great Tuesday morning here in your nation's capital, 6th day of January. January 6th. January 6th. Why does that sound familiar? Anyway, thanks for joining us here on O'Connor and Company. 635 Zack Smith Heritage Foundation. We'll talk about what's next for Nicolas Maduro as he faces justice in federal court. 705 Dustin Grage, investigative journalist in Minnesota. Give you the latest on the fall of Tim Walz. 735 Richard Goldberg, Foundation for Defense of Democracies on the Persian Street. And then at 805 Dr. Peter McCullough. Talk about the new change in vaccination schedules for children. It's Larry O'Connor, Julie Gunlock under the weather. But you're stuck with me this morning. Yesterday, Tim Walz made a stunning announcement. We reported to you during the show that the credible news sources in Minnesota were reporting late Sunday night that Tim Walz was going to announce that he was withdrawing from the governor's race. He was planning on running for a third term. Now, there are no term limits in Minnesota, but no governor has ever attempted to run for a third consecutive term. And, well, that record stands as Tim Walz has decided to withdraw. He planned on running. He had his campaign all set up. He had announced his reelection. He was in campaign mode. But now it is no more. And he gave a statement to the press yesterday, basically attacking Donald Trump, attacking right-wing media, as he put it, not taking ownership of any of the problems that have enveloped his campaign and his career, all the fraud, all of the incompetence. No, he said it was all Trump's fault. Then he walked away from the podium without taking any questions. Just a remarkable moment. In fact, if you listen here, you'll hear even the reporters in Minnesota who are, you talk about left-wing reporters in D.C. and Minnesota, it's times 10. There's no legitimate opposition voice in Minnesota. The last time Minnesota voted for a Republican for president was 1972, Richard Nixon. It's the longest a single state has gone in modern history without voting for a Republican in the Electoral College. Even in 84, when Ronald Reagan won 49 states, he lost Minnesota. That's how blue Minnesota is. But even the reporters in Minneapolis were ticked off at Tim Walz as he walked away without answering any questions. His entire statement was a diatribe against Trump. Listen.
I'm proud of the way we treat our neighbors. I'm proud of the way that we welcome people to this state. I'm proud of the way that we innovate. And I'm proud of the way that we are optimists for the future. No one's taking this away from us. Not the fraudsters. Certainly not this president. Not on my watch. Tomorrow, I'll be back with you. I'll give you an update on America's best paid family medical leave program that is now a week into it. And at that time, I'll take all your questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Press. I'll be back tomorrow. Next call, I'll more tomorrow. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow. All right.
Thank you, Press.
You said you were going to take questions. Why didn't you?
Thank you all. We'll be back tomorrow.
Amazing. Standing in front of the United States flag and the state of Minnesota flag, which looks remarkably like the national flag of the country of Somalia, Tim Walz walked away in an angry huff. The guy's got anger management problems, as we know, but to suddenly blame Donald Trump for the woes of his political future. Listen, if everything's so great in Minnesota, if they've got the best health program and the best education program and the best family leave program, he embraced every single big government idea that Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Kamala Harris put forth in the last 8 years. And if Minnesota was in such great shape, then why wouldn't he be running for a third term? He couldn't answer that question. He had no answer other than he was getting out. And I'll tell you the answer. It's obvious. Why does a politician decide not to run for office? Especially a politician who's already holding that office. Why does an incumbent governor decide he's not going to run for re-election, even though he legally could? Well, to answer the question, think about this. Why did Joe Biden decide not to run for re-election? Joe Biden was president. Joe Biden had every right legally, constitutionally, to run for a second term. Why didn't he? You know it's not because he had some sort of mental, physical, or cognitive disability. No, he still thinks he can be president. Why didn't Joe Biden run for re-election? Because he was going to lose. That's why, and he knew it. Nancy Pelosi knew it. Barack Obama knew it. Chuck Schumer knew it. That's why they all pulled him aside and staged their coup. The only reason a politician decides to let go of power, with one exception, George Washington. George Washington is the only guy in American history, probably in world history, who voluntarily relinquished power. Twice he did it. Once when he was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army and we had just defeated the greatest standing military on the planet, and he still relinquished his power and handed it over to the Confederation of States at the time before there was a constitution. And then he was called back into service as president. He ran for 2 terms, could have run for a third, but once again he relinquished power. Other than George Washington, no politician ever voluntarily gives up power. They walk away because they're going to lose, and that's exactly what Tim Walz did. And, by the way, I have no doubt that it was the same scenario. We'll find out. We'll hear. It'll leak over the course of the next several days or weeks, but he got phone calls from the powers that be that said, dude, you're not going to win, and we're going to hand Minnesota over to the MyPillow guy. That's right. The MyPillow guy is currently the only high-profile, well-funded Republican running for the Republican nomination in Minnesota right now. And it was Amy Klobuchar probably. It could have been Chuck Schumer. Could have been Hakeem Jeffries. Who knows? Who picked up the phone and said, Timmy, you got to get out now. Reports are that he had a long conversation with Senator Amy Klobuchar the night before he made this announcement yesterday. Now the speculation is that Klobuchar will seek the governorship of Minnesota so they can keep it in Democrats' hands because, of course, Democrats care only about retaining power. Then there will be a conversation about who will replace Amy Klobuchar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Tim Walz is donezo. He might not even fulfill his full term here, as he's the lamest of all lame ducks, at a time where reports are there are further investigations that could very well link Tim Walz directly to, if not the outright fraud that has been committed on his watch, but very likely the cover-up and the obstruction of justice. To that end, coming up at 7:05, we'll speak with Dustin Grage. He's an investigative journalist in Minnesota that specializes on Tim Walz and all of the corruption in that state. We've just scratched the surface on how bad things are in Minnesota, and I want to remind you again, Minnesota is the Democrat utopia. Anything a Democrat wants to get done, they get it done in Minnesota. And it's a basket case right now. And Tim Walz, well, you won't have him to kick around anymore. He walks out in shame as the buffoon worthy of all of your ridicule he deserves to be.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
22 years, spotless record, and you're being punished for it right now.
We're going to be shut down because people stole money. So now all my kids and everyone else's kids and disabled adults are going to be the ones that pay for the fraud.
That's the real world results of the fraud that's been committed. I think 90% of those who have been arrested or convicted are from the Somali community with huge political power within the Democrat Party in Minnesota. But that's a woman who runs a legitimate autism center. And now they're facing bankruptcy because they are not getting the state and federal benefits that they are entitled to because they're a legit business. That investigation from Dustin Grage, who will be joining us at 7:05 to talk about the scandal. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, really has a great national perspective on this Tim Walz story. I want to read you what he put out. This is Newt Gingrich yesterday. Governor Tim Walz's announcement that he's withdrawing from the governor's race and not planning to run a third time is an historic moment. Not long ago, he was the Democrat Party nominee for vice president. The Minneapolis big government socialist scandal is so enormous, $1 billion to $16 billion lost, depending on who you listen to. It may be the decisive moment in defining corruption and fraud as the core nature of big government socialism. Its incompetent bureaucratic systems and inherently power-oriented allies are already central themes in American politics. Walz is simply the incompetent poster child of a nationwide system of left-wing establishment corruption. It may amount to $400 billion or more stolen every year. That means every American is paying $1,000 plus corruption tax annually. Think about that. You're paying a corruption tax. You're paying tax to keep the corrupt machine that feeds the Democrat Party beast alive. They keep coming back to you for more money and more money and more. Oh, this thing is horrible, and these children need your help, and these elderly need your help. And there are people who need your assistance. There are people, and we're good-hearted, Judeo-Christian, loving, charitable people. And you pull on our heartstrings, and you say, you've got it so well, why can't you just give a little bit more? And you do give incredibly generously to charity. Voluntarily you give. We are the most generous people on the planet, but that's not enough. No. They need to take it at the point of a gun in taxation. They take it from you and tell you that if you don't willingly give your tax dollars more and more and more and more to the tune of half of your income, then you're cold-hearted, you're evil, you want children to die. But really what they're doing with your money is feeding this monster, this bureaucratic giant beast of non-government organizations that get fat and rich and wealthy, and then they give a little bit of their money back to the Democrat Party so the Democrats can get reelected so they can keep taking your money to feed back into that circle of life that we call bureaucratic corruption. Newt Gingrich continues, saying Walz is proof that the system is becoming so sick that it cannot be explained away, and his campaign would have collapsed under the weight of it. Imagine how bad America would have been had Walz become vice president. Amen to that. And let's just remind you that this is all because a citizen journalist took a GoPro camera and a Rode Bluetooth microphone and knocked on the doors of these establishments. Anyone could have done it. Any of the networks, any of the cable news stations, any of the major well-funded newspapers. Oh, heck, let's step outside the media circle for a moment. How about some state auditors that could have done it? How about some federal auditors that could have done it? You know, we have a trust system right now with our government. They take your money and they promise you they're doing good things with it. But what are they doing to back up that trust? What are they doing to ensure that you trust that they're spending your money? At this point, it's incumbent on them to prove to us that our federal and state governments aren't ripe with fraud. This is no longer, the burden of proof is not on us to go knock on doors with cameras and microphones to say, look, I think there's fraud going on here. No, the burden of proof needs to be on them to prove to us that what they're spending our hard-earned money on is legit. More scandal out of Minnesota, this involving the Hilton Corporation. We'll get to that in a moment. It's 6:21.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
A Hilton, a Hampton Inn, which is a Hilton property, had a reservation for a person coming up this month, and they did a Google search for some reason on the person's name and then sent this email back to the person who had set up the reservation. It says, after further investigation online, we have found information about immigration work connected with your name, and we will be canceling your upcoming reservation. You should see a proper cancellation email in your inbox shortly from Hilton. This was an email address with a .gov email account, and whoever was responsible for the reservations decided to do a search and determined, oh, this is immigration, this is DHS, this is ICE. No room at the inn at Hilton. Now, Hilton claims that this was just a franchise organization. Hilton hotels serve as welcoming places for all. This hotel is independently owned and operated, and the actions referenced are not reflective of Hilton values. We're investigating the matter with the individual hotel and can confirm that Hilton works with governments, law enforcement, and community leaders around the world to ensure our properties are open and inviting to everyone. Let me tell you something about franchises. I assure you there's language in there that if the franchisee does something that brings disrepute or bad publicity or is in some way against the values of the franchisor, in this case Hilton, the franchisor has a lot of power in this case, and Hilton can stop this immediately. This is an embarrassment, and by the way, the Hilton brand got some online attention yesterday through social media that they did not want. They're backtracking. They say, oh, no, it wasn't Hilton. It was just this independent hotel in Minnesota. Yeah, as long as that place has the Hilton brand on it, this is on Hilton. That ain't going to fly. Coming up, we're going to have a conversation with Zack Smith, Heritage Foundation legal expert, talk about what's next for Nicolas Maduro and what it's going to look like in federal court for the former dictator of Venezuela and whether he can even get a real normal trial in this country. Zack Smith coming up next at 6:30 on O'Connor and Company.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:37. Larry O'Connor here on O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 7:05, Dustin Grage, investigative journalist in Minnesota. 7:35, Richard Goldberg, Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Going to look at the Persian Street and whether Iran will fall. 8:05, Dr. Peter McCullough on the new vaccination schedule for your kids. Julie Gunlock under the weather this morning, so you're stuck with me. But good news, Zack Smith is here. He's a former assistant United States attorney for the Northern District of Florida and now at the Heritage Foundation, the mighty Heritage Foundation. Zack, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, what a scene yesterday as the former dictator of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife were, was that an arraignment? What was the official hearing there in a federal court for him?
Yeah, that's right. It was an initial appearance, an arraignment. Essentially, it's the first step in the criminal process that's going to play out likely over the next several years. Essentially, they were informed of the charges against them. They were afforded an opportunity to have a lawyer appointed or to retain counsel and essentially enter their plea, which, of course, both of them pled not guilty to the very serious charges being brought against them.
Zack, I keep hearing from, experts who know so much more than me on cable news that this is unprecedented, that this is borderline kidnapping, that this is a violation of federal law, that we in America, we just don't do this sort of thing. Is there precedent for this sort of deal?
Larry, do you mean to tell me the so-called experts on cable news could exaggerate sometimes? I'm shocked.
That's why we invited Zack Smith of Heritage Foundation.
Look, this is not unprecedented. In fact, there's ample historical and legal precedent to support the president's and the administration's actions in this case. Think back to the late 1980s, early 1990s, when Manuel Noriega, the Panamanian dictator, essentially President George H.W. Bush sent U.S. forces in to help bring Manuel Noriega to justice, to have him stand trial for the charges he faced. And if you listen to what Secretary of State Marco Rubio, what Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said in the immediate aftermath of this very successful raid, they made clear this was essentially a law enforcement action. Federal agents were on the ground with U.S. forces when they captured Nicolas Maduro because he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest. And now we know that the indictment from the Southern District of New York that's been unsealed, he and 5 other individuals are facing, again, very serious narco trafficking, drug trafficking, and gun-related charges.
Yeah. And talk to me about the venue, because when the president made the announcement in his press conference in Mar-a-Lago, there was some suggestion that, yes, he was brought to the Southern District of New York first off, but he might end up in the Southern District of Florida. What's going on there, and who will determine what the venue will be? Will that be the Justice Department, or will it be the judges in this case?
Yeah, well, the reason he's in the Southern District of New York right now is that's where the indictment came from. So if he were to change to a different venue, there would likely have to be another indictment brought against him. But for now, this indictment that we've all heard so much about, this 25-page indictment laying out essentially his role as the head of a cartel drug trafficking organization, that was brought in New York. And so for now, that is where the criminal proceedings will take place.
He said through an interpreter when he was being arraigned, when asked what his plea was. Well, first the judge asked for him to confirm his identity. He said, "I am the president of Venezuela. I was captured at my home in Caracas, Venezuela." The judge interrupted him and told him there'd be plenty of time for him to challenge that later. And then he said, "I'm innocent. I'm not guilty. I'm a decent man. I'm still president of my country." How does this play out exactly? I don't think I even remember what happened with Manuel Noriega in the long run. I remember, the effort in Panama to seize him and bring him in. But how does this usually go? Do they get a fair trial? What's it look like?
Yeah, I think he will. It's going to be a very lengthy process, Larry. What we saw in court yesterday, which was really surreal images of Nicolas Maduro essentially being loaded into a helicopter, transported from the Brooklyn Correctional Facility to federal court in Lower Manhattan there. This is just the first step, and it's going to be a very lengthy process. The defense attorneys for both Maduro and his wife said they expect voluminous discovery in this case. Essentially, a lot of documents are going to go back and forth between prosecutors and defense attorneys. I suspect that's right. We'll have to wait and see who may be cooperating against Nicolas Maduro, if his wife or others try to cut some type of deal in order to lessen their own legal exposure. But look, the charges Maduro is facing, they are very serious. He is facing decades, if not the rest of his life in prison, if convicted on just a few of these charges. And so I say stay tuned. And to your point, Larry, Manuel Noriega's case, his trial was a very lengthy trial. It took years for that legal process to play out, and I suspect we may see something similar in this case.
It's ironic that Nicolas Maduro and his wife, now facing justice in America, will have more rights than any Venezuelan citizen had for the last 25 years under Chavez and Maduro. It's an irony that is sort of bittersweet, I suppose, but it's what makes America different. One last question here, Zack Smith. Always a good conversation with you. Who gets the $25 million reward that Joe Biden offered on this thing?
Well, I think if you listen to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, essentially because the U.S. forces acted unilaterally to capture Maduro, to bring him to justice, execute that warrant, I'm not sure that reward will be paid out. But I think it does highlight the irony. Just a few years ago, Democrats were talking about how dangerous Nicolas Maduro is, how he needs to be brought to justice. And now that President Trump has done just that, so many Democratic politicians are now singing a very different tune.
It's almost like certain politicians in this town are hypocritical, Zach.
Again, wonders never cease.
We're both shocked. We begin with a shock, and now we finish with a shock. Zack Smith, Heritage Foundation, always good to speak with you, sir. Keep up the good work there.
Thanks. Good to see you, too. Take care.
It's 6:43.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
It's a new era over at CBS News, as you know, as Barry Weiss has been brought in as the new editor-in-chief of all of their operations. Barry Weiss, of course, hardly a conservative, but she's a little more fair than most people. Let's put it this way. She was not liberal and lunatic enough for the New York Times, and she was drummed out of that place because she actually took a critical eye to some of the reporting being done over there after holding out her independent shingle and building the free press up to 2 million subscribers now. CBS News hired her. Well, I should say the CBS network hired her to be in charge of CBS News. And one of the top jobs here so far was to clean up 60 Minutes. She held a story that was being done on the CCOT prison down in El Salvador because she believed it was unfair to the Trump administration by not getting quotes from them and their response on the record, which is 100% true. 60 Minutes was actually lying in their initial report that Barry Weiss pulled and did not put on the air. And now the second major decision was putting in a new anchor for CBS Evening News. His name is Tony DeCopel. DeCopel, I believe is how you pronounce it. He's been part of the CBS Morning Show. And again, he's no conservative. But take a listen to this report yesterday about the actions in Venezuela, and you tell me if you sense a different tone, perhaps a different approach to reporting the news to the viewers of CBS Evening News.
As you just heard from Jill, we should not expect this to affect gas prices all that much, which does raise the question of how exactly it helps the United States, if it helps the United States at all. What is it actually about? Well, if you zoom out a bit, you can maybe see the outlines of an answer. For decades, Russia, China, and Iran have been building a presence in Venezuela, a base of power and influence in the hemisphere. With Maduro now out, that base of power and influence could be out too.
Now, that may be a little thing right there, but that is more than we've gotten from CBS News for the last 10 years when it comes to any actions taken by the Trump administration, to actually pause for a moment and reflect that there may be good, positive, strategic, and wise decision-making behind something that the president has done. Usually, we would get the same thing we get from all of the media outlets. Again, I'm not trying to celebrate CBS News and trumpet the fact that there's a changeover. That right there immediately sounded different than what we heard from Norah O'Donnell or from whoever else was doing CBS News. Of course, CBS News is sort of the evening news on all the networks is a dwindling concern. They don't have the same kind of impact or influence that they used to have, but it's still something. And it speaks to what the editorial choices will be going forward for that news outlet, for that news organization. So it's going to be interesting to see. They are claiming, Tony DeCopel actually put out a video over the weekend claiming that he's going to be approaching this differently than the way the news has been approached over the years. He says that he's going to be more accountable and more transparent than even Walter Cronkite was back in the day. He says that for him, the biggest difference is that people don't trust us like they used to, and it's not just us, it's all the legacy media. And he says there have been too many stories. The press has missed the story because we've taken into account the perspective of advocates and not the average American, or we put too much weight in the analysis of academics or elites and not enough on the American people. Again, it's all talk. I'll see it when I believe it. But so far, after one day, I'm sensing something slightly different over there at CBS News. Let's keep an eye on it. It's 6:52.